In this video, we're going to be talking about how you actually change your assumptions, because one, I think there's a lot of confusion around what your guys are actually doing to manifest your reality, and two, we're making this too damn complicated and it doesn't need to be. So stay tuned.
I'll be your light.
Hey lovelies, welcome back to the Manifestation Sisters community. My name is Leah.
My name's Tia.
Here on this channel, we help you to master your mind and manifest all of your desires. Before we jump into the video, I want to let you know that myself and Tia offer our one-to-one signature Next Level You coaching, where we help you to manifest anything that you want and create your dream life. If you want to find out more about that, the link is in the description box down below.
Before we jump into this video and we dive into the nitty-gritties of how you actually change an assumption, what is the official definition of an assumption? Because I think a lot of you guys need to know this, because you're doing this work without actually knowing what an assumption is. And an assumption is an acceptance that something is true or exists as true without official proof. That's what an assumption is. And the same definition applies to a belief. You're accepting something is true without having the physical evidence of it yet. Things like this. I was having this conversation to really home in on an example of this. Before this video, I was like to Leah, have you ever seen a Black Panther in real life?
And I was like, no.
And she was like, no. And I was like, well, how do you actually know they're real? How do you actually know they exist? Because she's formed an assumption about it. Without actually seeing it in real life, she knows that this thing exists in her head.
We aren't needing to see it because, you know, we've seen it in like the movies, or we've watched like an animal program or anything like that, so we know like it just is, so we take it as face value. And it's the same when we're growing up and we get these beliefs from our parents, like money doesn't grow on cheese, or relationships are hard, or you have to really work hard for what you want, and you just take that as factual. And then that becomes your assumption, your belief, and then you spend your life assuming that way until you awaken and think, do you know what, actually maybe this belief isn't true for me. Maybe this is something I don't to subscribe to anymore, because believing that money is hard or it doesn't grow on trees isn't working for me, because I can see in my physical reality it's not working for me because I don't have any money. So it's really, there's many different examples of assumptions and how they can be formed through our childhood, or it's a thought that we just kept practicing over and over and over and over until it became an ingrained assumption, which obviously, like we said, it's a belief. Assumption, in my opinion, is law of belief. So even though it's the law of assumption, it's also the law of belief.
Same thing.
It's the same thing. So it's like if you're dating someone and you start to have an assumption about them that they're always late, this person is always late, and then they start to show up always late because in your reality everyone is playing a role that you assign them. Everyone is playing the script role that you assign them because your life is your movie. So we form so many different assumptions about people. We see it all the time. Like, you could be in a work environment and someone says to you, oh, that person isn't very nice, and you believe them just like that without even knowing that person first of all. So you're automatically making an assumption that person isn't very nice. And I've seen it when I used to be in work environments and things like that, and I always chose not to take on other people's preconceptions about people until I knew them. Assumptions, other people's assumptions. So I would have an instant with someone where they were absolutely lovely, and then in someone else's opinion, with their assumption that this person's an asshole. So that's two different people's perspectives there about the same person, but one person chose not to take the assumptions of others, and the other person chose to take the assumptions of others and listen to those assumptions. So it's up to you to form your own assumptions here.
Exactly. And we're telling you this to bring you awareness to knowing that you have been forming assumptions since you were a doll. We've been picking up on assumptions, beliefs, and programming. That's what our program is, from younger years right up until now. All we're doing with this work and manifesting is choosing to form assumptions deliberately. The way we change our assumptions is by changing our thinking. And it's that simple. And what we need to know, guys, is it's that simple. We don't need to overcomplicate it. We don't need to do everything under the sun, or think things 10k times, or do this tool or this technique, although they assist the change in thinking. You can simply decide something. All the things are there to do is to assist you in changing your dominant thinking, because every single thing we do, whether it's scripting, visualization, SATs, or inner conversations, all they're doing is changing our thinking. When you come down to the basics of it, all they're doing is changing our dominant thinking. When you change your dominant thinking, when you form an assumption, it must manifest. The law of assumption. That's what we want to home in to, you guys. You change your assumptions by changing your thinking.
So in your reality, if you're experiencing something you really don't like, or something isn't going your way, and you really hold yourself accountable, because this is what it is, like, we are the cause of everything in our reality, and we're also the solution. So if you're having a bad experience with SP, or anyone in your reality, or with money, or whatever it is you're trying to manifest for yourself, what are your assumptions about it? You have to get clear. What are your unfavourable assumptions, first of all, about it? Money doesn't grow on trees, SP doesn't treat me right. I'll give a friend's example. I've got no friends, I've got no money, my business is doing really bad. So they're all unfavourable assumptions, and they're just thoughts you kept thinking over and over and over and over, and now you've formed a natural belief and assumption that in this area this is what it is. So you see those assumptions, and then you're like, okay, these aren't serving me, so what is the harm in me creating a favourable assumption? A favourable assumption that I'm always respected by people in my life, especially my SP. I always have more than enough money, my business is doing so amazingly, I have the most amazing group of friends, and the list goes on. So now it's your time to affirm that favourable assumption and persist in that assumption. Because as you persist in that new assumption, what happens? The old assumption starts to dissipate. It's not your truth anymore. It's not what you're identifying with anymore. You're identifying with this new assumption. So as you identify with this new thinking and these new assumptions, that's going to be a belief, an ingrained assumption and a ingrained belief for you, because you're no longer going to identify with those old thinking patterns, those old assumptions, because they're not your truth anymore.
Exactly, like we said in our previous video, as you continue, your focus and your attention is your power. As you continue to put your focus and your attention on these thinking patterns, on these beliefs, that is the reality you're selecting for yourself. So like Leah said perfectly, to change your assumptions, and I'm going to say it really slowly, is to get clear on all the unfavourable assumptions that are currently creating your life. And this will look like thinking patterns that quote into your negative thinking, or negative bias of you thinking negatively about yourself, their life experiences, other people, because it is you creating it. You have a dominant assumption and belief that is creating and selecting that reality where you get to experience it. So all the times where you're thinking things don't work out, you don't have money, you don't have friends, nothing is going in your favour, they're all assumptions. And in order to change an assumption, you bring your awareness to it so you can shift it into something favourable for yourself. And every time you catch yourself thinking these shitty negative assumptions, you correct your mind to your truth. And naturally, as you give your attention and your focus to the new assumptions, you deactivate the old ones. Because they're no longer in your presence, they're no longer in your consciousness. As Devil said, you rise to a higher level of consciousness by taking your attention away from what's not working and placing it upon that which you desire to be. And that's what you're doing with this work. My new assumptions, my new self-concept is essentially what is going to manifest, because I've become the version of me that is lucky in love, where things always work out, where I have more than enough money, I have loads of friends. And that must reflect out into your 3D reality, because it is law.
Yeah, and it's you identifying with that new version of yourself and creating an identity and those thinking patterns which form those assumptions and those beliefs. And now that you're identifying with this person, and it's you just deciding, do you know what, no, I'm not that person anymore. These are my new favourable assumptions. This is how I now think, and I'm going to trust in this and know that my 3D will catch up eventually, because that is old creation and I'm creating my new future self. I'm stepping into that version of me every day, how that person thinks, how that person behaves, and how that person feels, how that person lives their life. And you're doing that with your thinking, your dominant new assumptions about yourself, which are creating those new assumptions and those new beliefs. So please be sure to share, comment and subscribe, especially like the video because it helps the channel grow and reach as many people as possible. And we're so grateful to have our amazing community and you all be here on this journey and this journey with us together. So if you also want to work with myself or Tia one-to-one, our coaching services are available. The link for that is in the description box down below, and we will see you in the next video.